I think we should get started. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this beautiful day as we stand and sit here on Wajak Noongar Budja, to whose people I pay my respects and acknowledgement, and my connection to country, to land, to water, to sky, to seas, to spirit, to air, continue to be strong. I would like to very much thank Desmond and Helen for being present here today and for making the time to share their stories of connection, of collaboration, of healing, their journey together, which has been a long journey. And I would also like to thank Janet Holmes for making today possible and for making this exhibition possible. I am forever grateful to be able to bring these significant projects out into the public sphere. And for some housekeeping, the bathrooms are out the door and to your left if you need to use the bathroom. And make sure you pick up a catalogue on your way out if you haven't already. It has a bit more information about the show in it, and it's just a nice document. And we have a lot of catalogues, so it'd be good if they walked out the door. What else? I had one more point, I think. Okay. What would work best with this talk, I think, is if it was quite dynamic and conversational. So, I mean, I will ask questions, but I would also like to invite questions from the audience as we go. So if you think something that Desmond and Helen say trigger a question within you, don't wait for the end. Let's make it more of a yarn, if you like. And I guess the place to start with these things is at the beginning, and at the beginning of your connection, Helen and Desmond, and what how you first met, and what brought you to this place here to create this amazing work together.
Yeah, thank you.
And let us know if you can't hear clearly, and I'll try and do what I can with our technology to make it amplified, but we'll see what we can do. Okay, please.
Okay, well, I guess for me, my journey, and if I cry, please don't worry, it's emotions and nerves. It started for me as a late bloomer. When I graduated in the year 2000, I needed a job so that I could support myself, one-day job, a one-day only, and then I'd have enough money, to run my arts practice. So I applied to the Bunbury prison for a job. And on my first day at the job, I was quite shocked. It was full of Noongar men. And I'd never had much to do with Aboriginal people before, and I have to confess that I didn't have a particularly good attitude either. So working with those men, and I worked there for some 8 years, it changed my perspective altogether. And it made me want to know more about our Australian history, our shared Indigenous history and Australian history. And I went to Curtin Uni and studied for a year in the Centre for Aboriginal Studies, learning from Aboriginal lecturers. And at the end of that time, I understood a lot more about our shared history. I was writing my honours thesis and talking a lot to my friend who's here, John Sherwood. And I'd talked to John about Desmond and my shared tragedy, and I felt I needed to get in touch with Desmond. And after some years of trying to find him, Josh rang me one day and said, "Does the name Desmond Taylor mean anything?"
Josh or?
Sorry, John. And that was the beginning of how I met Desmond. John knew someone that Desmond worked for, so I started corresponding with that person, and for the next 16 years, I, every few months, would contact that person and say, "I'm still wanting to meet Desmond." And then one day, John rang me and said, "I'm with Desmond. I've told him you're my friend." And Desmond says, "It's time we met." And that's when we got together, and we went up to the Pilbara together and performed some very moving, transformative ceremonies together. Would you like to say anything now, Des? Is that?
It took me a very long time to get in touch with Helen. And because of John, he bridged that gap to bring us together. And we've worked together and did a lot of work together. But it's been taken so long for me to get to know her and get in contact. And I've lived in many places throughout Australia, and I try to find redemption as well. And there was a time that I knew it was time to meet Helen, to bring some closure to our life and move forward. Forget about yesterday, because we don't know what tomorrow brings.
Would it be all right if I explain the Papiri?
Sure.
That's a lovely place to start. I think for me, Desmond, that had such an impact on me when you explained to me why we would make these strange little circles that you can see just over here. I didn't understand that, and for a couple of years, Desmond didn't actually tell me what we were doing when we would make these. And the purpose of those circles, you wear them on your head, and it's to take the weight of what it is you're going to discuss. And the idea is you must stay calm and centred or it falls off your head. And you have to start the conversation again, and you go on until you've reached an agreement, and then you never ever have to talk about that again. And I thought that was just such an amazing, amazing Matu tradition that I made this very big one behind us. Yeah.
You're not going to put on your head, Helen.
No.
Yeah, it's also about balancing the weight that you are carrying.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I guess the other significant ceremony for me is when we go to a particular place near Nullagine, and each time we meet there, we make it sacred, cleanse it and smoke it and make it all fresh again. And that's the images that are over there on the black wall that explains what we do. And we stand there and we talk truth to each other, and talk about what's happened, and for me, very, very healing. Smoke each other, cleanse each other. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of being present on country, sitting on
Yes.
country, talking
Yeah.
together,
Yeah.
and making together, Helen?
Yes, yeah. We, apart from making the berries, we have these here as well. And all of that vegetation is significant in one way or another. So there's branches from my country in Capel, and of course Desmond's country, but those particular branches were significant to Desmond as well, that vegetation. And the spear making over here, yep. Still not sure why I made them, but well, we didn't spear each other. So, yeah.
Would spear making be a traditional men's practice, Desmond?
Yeah, mainly, yeah.
Yeah. So it's quite a privilege.
Absolutely a privilege. And I guess just to sit there on country and be taught these things, be taught appropriate ways to work together, appropriate ways for an Indigenous man and a non-Indigenous woman to interact together. It's a big, steep learning curve, would you say?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about your works over here, Des? What would you like to say about those?
What about the 3 paintings?
Yeah.
Yeah. The first painting down at the bottom is about how we first came to our first meeting, and John was at that meeting. He was present. That was at Fortescue River, Newman. The middle one is about the Fortescue River. And the third one was yellow. It's about the continuation about our meetings. We had many discussions and conversations over many period of time. And the fourth one is our collaboration about my home, the rivers, and also about the Bunbury area of Helen's place. Yeah.
And we did that one together down on my land. Yeah. So, questions? Yes, Janet.
I've got lots of questions, but also the statement that I think this is one of the most important exhibitions I've had in this gallery. And I thank you both for it, and I'm so pleased that you're here, Desmond, to hear me say that. But one of the questions I had for Desmond was where you and Helen first met, and each time you represent Helen and yourself, Helen gets one line beside her and you get 2. What do they...
That's a symbol of, it's a symbol of male and female.
That's a symbol.
Yes.
Right. Thank you. The other thing is, I like Helen. Could you talk about this item that's hanging in the sky? Because I know what it is, but it's a wonderful part of your story.
It's a cloud, right? My representation of a cloud. And you'll see there's one white cloud over there and another one white cloud over there. And this cloud is sitting above the blanket that I've stitched in all the colours of the area that Desmond and I go to. And the blue blanket up the top is the big blue sky that is the Pilbara. And sometimes when we're working, this one white cloud comes and Desmond says, that's your father. And there he is, hanging over the land. Yeah.
And the blanket there as well, Helen, you've explained it as being your conversations.
Yep.
So, conversation might start out quite circular, is that right? And then
Yep.
it spreads
Yes.
out into
Yeah.
different threads. It's incredibly detailed and complex, like your conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Unless I'm heavily invested in something, I can't do that much work because it goes on and on and on, For months I'm stitching and stitching and stitching. So that's what I'm meditating on, the things that Desmond and I have talked about, and where perhaps what's the path? Where's this energy leading us? So it's a very spontaneous way of working, and it goes on till the blanket's finished. And I think that's a little bit like what you say in the video, that one day we'll get where we're going to get, and who knows when that might be. And that's a bit the feeling of when you're doing the stitching of a blanket. Yeah.
And it's beautiful. Sorry, Simon, just one second. It's beautiful how that blanket has then become a prop in your photographs. It's
Yeah.
I think of that country and that place being incredibly hot, and there you are sitting under a blanket.
It was hot.
It's quite remarkable.
It was really hot. Yeah. The blanket actually made much more sense after I had taken it up on country and asked Desmond to sit under it with me. Yes.
On a hot day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two little kids in a cubby.
At the same time, at that time?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And yes, we were giggling like naughty children under there because my knees do not do that like Desmond's, so it was very uncomfortable. Yeah, but so around this area are a lot of very tall anthills, and so seeing this image taken by Sam over here, who's the videographer, it made sense in the landscape then, that these are the colours of the landscape and that were the shapes, they were the shapes of the landscape, and it was Desmond and I making those shapes. For me, blankets are about home security, all of those very positive, loving feelings, and I guess that's how it felt sitting under the blanket. Oops.
And the stitches themselves are like the spin effects that the ants break up, like into small little bits, aren't they?
Yes, and that's what, there's a tie over there that is, it's got a slight stripe to it, and Desmond did explain to me on country that inside these giant anthills is tiny little pieces, all exactly the same size, cut by the white ants, and that's what fills, and that's the food that feeds the grubs and the ants, and that makes the resin that the ants produce to put with the soil to make the cement. Yeah, it is, totally.
Your description of the practice of your art and of this story, these two stories, has an unhurried character about it, sort of patience. Can you describe the role that the passage of time has had in your work and in your relationship?
That's a big one.
Yeah.
It's the role of the passage of time in their work and their relationship.
When two strangers come together to talk about something incredibly personal, like a tragedy, then I guess there's a time when you first meet and swap stories, and that's exhilarating after those 16 years. But then it's hard work after that, because we're different cultures. We're totally different cultures, different sexes, man, woman. So to learn what's appropriate and what's not appropriate takes years. And recently I'm forever reading to try to improve that. And I read somewhere that asking questions is very, very impolite in Matu culture. And I said to Desmond, do I ask too many questions? He said, yes, you do. You know, in my culture, asking questions is not only how you learn something, but it's polite to be interested in the other person. So that's just an example of a difference that you just wouldn't think would be a difference, but it is. What would you like to say about our relationship and how it's progressed, if it's progressed? Yeah.
It's been very hard at the start, but we've moved along slowly. There's no rush. And then we began to find our own place in our work relationship. Because of being total strangers working for the first time, it's been very hard.
Simon, do you have a question?
Firstly, I just want to honour the incredible courage and bravery of Desmond and Helen that has meant that you can use art to come together around this. And I remember Janet at the start just saying what a wonderful thing in a time when there's so many intractable things in our world that is going to be so thank you both. But I was wondering, the works over there, Desmond, that gone ahead about weight, and I really love this work here, the cloud. Did you make them and then the cloud? I wondered if the idea of weight and weightlessness was something that informed this, and where did it fit? Was the other question.
You covered my collection of tin. Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, making the large babiri was my first thought after making those, and they were made over several years. So I eventually thought, it's such a magnificent idea, I have to make a really big one. Honestly, Simon, I can't remember the thought process I know I'll make a cloud. Yeah, everything flows one from the other. And I think when the blanket was finished, the stitching, I just naturally thought of, well, this is the land, what's representing the sky? Yeah, and that's where it came. And as a welder, and I love all the marks of history, That's the marks of my history. The soil is the mark of Desmond's history. So I've cut my history up into little pieces. It's not a history I'm proud of. So I've refigured it, if you like, into something that I admire, this little white cloud that comes. Welded it all together. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. John.
I'm interested to hear, having been with you after you swapped phone numbers and had Pilbara, Capel area conversations for a while, we met in Kings Park under a big shady tree, and you had a couple of hours after a hug and a getting to know each other. You expressed something that's in the program and has been mentioned before, of your great desire, each of you in a different way, to reach reconciliation and healing. Would you be able to discuss now that the project has come to here as an exhibition, which was identified, I think, even under that gum tree, that you'd like to hold a joint exhibition? After a couple of hours you came to that, not at the beginning. How you feel about the reconciliation and the healing between you two? Through art, of course.
Yeah. I guess the easiest way I can express it is Desmond is my brother, I am his sister. I am Barangu.
Burunga. Burunga.
Burungu. I'm terrible with
Yeah, we both Burungas, yeah.
Burungu. Yeah.
Yeah, that was our first meeting at Kings Park. Yeah.
How do you now see, how do you feel about any reconciliation and healing towards Helen? And then I might come back and ask Helen if she'd follow up her. How have these 3 years and all the art and the travel and the two-country...
At first it was very hard, but we just went along slowly to get to know each other and to work together. It's been a bit of a long process. Yeah. And we're still traveling that journey today.
I don't think a journey like this has an end. No.
But what do you feel about where you've reached so far in terms of reconciliation and healing? Over and above being Desmond's sister and
Yeah.
so on.
It's a big question, John. Yeah. What do I feel? I'm very proud. I'm extremely proud of where we've come from, that we're still speaking to each other. We still care about each other. We've made all this work together. We've sat on country and painted little squares in the colour of country to find our way into how do you begin such a project, you know? Healing, forgiveness, reconciliation. How do you start? How does that transpose itself into art? So when you say about our relationship, I guess that's how it started. We started doing the sacred ceremony, cleansing everything, talking honestly about things that concern both of us.
Can I ask, do you feel like you've cleansed all the trauma and stuff you've held on? You've done your ceremony never to talk about it again. Do you feel a lot lighter? Do you feel everything's moved now?
I think it's still a continuation of our ceremonies that we have to do to go back out on country and to do more cleansing, more smoking.
With respect to sitting with the papyri,
What was the question, Helen? What was the question?
would you repeat your question?
I was just, with all the healing and the speaking with that, and you say when we talk about letting it, when we talk about letting it go, like all the healing and pain and never to be spoken about it, I was wondering if all of the pain has been spoken about, healing and release, because it's not to come up again. On your personal journey with your healing.
Yeah.
Or is it finished? Is that what you mean? Yeah, has like the exhibition now, has most of the pain gone, they heal the face to let it go, because in the ceremonies they're not to talk about it once they've done it. So I just wondered how far over this journey they've got with it.
We've never had to talk about the tragedy again. We talked once, both of us talked from our positions, and no, we've never felt the need to talk again.
That's very healing.
Very, in that way. The trauma perhaps is a little different. Yeah. So while I came to our relationship already feeling along that path, I need to find this man and tell him I know about our combined histories and I want him to understand how I feel. But for Desmond, is a much bigger journey for him. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to ask about materials and your use of materials in this exhibition, both of you. Clearly they range from very hard materials such as the iron, the rusted iron, to the soft kind of textiles, fabrics, threads. I guess there were some deliberate choices along the way of interpreting ideas one way or another with different materials.
Questioning the use of materials.
So, for me, materials are really important. The materiality of my work is possibly the most important aspect of it. It has to tell the story along with what I do with those materials. So, for instance, all those ties over there on the wall, there's 5 ties that talk about my land and 5 ties that talk about Desmond's land. And there's a jacket I stitched, and we both wear it. Half the jacket is Desmond's culture, half the jacket is my culture in colour-wise. I'm a woman, like to stitch. That's been a family tradition of mine. when I was a little girl and we'd go on holiday, my brother got to go fishing with my dad, and I had to sit in the car and do embroidery with my mum. You know, it was a big tradition. Unfortunately, I didn't get rid of it, and I still can't catch fish. Desmond and I tried fishing. So I've explained about blankets and what blankets mean. And when I'm using those threads, they're like threads of our conversations or threads of thought threads. It's all about threads and stitching and mending, and I come from a make-do family as well, so I think that also is why I like to use found materials, repurposed materials.
And the metals there.
Oh, the metal, well, I just love rusty metal. And back in 2010, I decided I wanted to be a welder, so I went off to learn welding, and now I teach women welding. But physically now, I'm getting a bit old, and I can't weld all day. It's really heavy work, especially if you have to hoik that around, to tip it over to weld the other side and things like that. So often it's welding in the morning and embroidery in the afternoon. So, yeah. But I love both. I think I just have a very busy brain, so all of those different things keep me engaged.
And Helen, obviously you use a diversity of materials, but Desmond, you're very much painting. What do you think of Helen's crazy use of materials, of different materials, Desmond?
Yeah.
Do you, in the video, you say you're slowly coming around to accepting Helen's work?
Yes.
Do you feel you've come to a point of understanding the different materials that she uses?
Oh, sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes.
It's all right.
Yeah.
I don't understand either sometimes.
Helen, one of the things that occurred to me was that the blanket that you wore was a grey blanket. And many of us here will remember that if you had, in the past, there was a time when in Australia, if you had a tiny bit, no matter how small, of Indigenous blood, you could claim a blanket.
Yeah.
Was that in your mind when you used that? Because they were all grey blankets, and actually I happen to know they were made by the Albany woolen mills, and the scraps that fell on the floor, that's why they were grey, just any old colour. Was that in your mind when you were?
Definitely the grey colour, definitely. And Desmond had told me a story about blankets once, and it was a negative for him, and I wanted to make a beautiful blanket for that reason.
And you did.
And we laughed under it, so and hope there weren't snakes. We'd been doing photography, standing on the edge of the cliff, holding the blankets so the wind would take the blankets. And to take these photos, Sam had to lie on the ground, right? And we were there with Sohan, Ariel Hayes, and at one stage Sohan said, "And what's that on the ground?" And we looked down, we said to Desmond, "What is it?" And he jumped 10 foot backwards. It was a death adder that had been just where Sam had been lying, and we'd all been walking. So when we were under this blanket, Desmond was saying about the snake. Yeah.
Oh, my question actually follows on from the question about the materials.
I just wanted to hear more about the jacket and how you came to decide to make that work. Yeah, that's a very difficult one to answer in this context, Sharon.
Just say something about it that you want to. How long did it take you to make the jacket?
The jacket did a lot of travelling. It travelled up to the Pilbara, and I sat there at the site of this tragedy and slowly stitched that blanket. We did have a video of that stitching, but unfortunately the little iPad has died, so we can't show that anymore. But like I said before, I don't actually start with the end product. Somehow an idea comes, I don't know where from, and I begin. And it's the same with metalwork, painting, all of it. And I did want to make a jacket, and I wanted it to be a jacket that represented both Desmond and myself. So, and I offer you all the opportunity to look inside the jacket. It's got lovely long threads. And I think the inside is perhaps more beautiful than the outside. And of course, if you have a jacket, you make ties. That's, yeah.
Can I ask about the beautiful lino work over there, Poetics of Memory? Tell us a bit about that.
Okay. It's those found materials again. And for me, looking at, these are very early linos, so be assured there's no asbestos in them. They're bitumen backed, and when I look at those little scraps, it talks to me about my childhood home. It talks about bedrooms, talks about Sunday roast dinner. It talks about Christmas Day when grandparents came. Lino is also really hard to come by. So when I use it, I save all those tiny little scraps. And then I had a big box of scraps. I thought, well, I'll just have to sew them all together. So I wore out my 32-year-old faff sewing machine. And I stitched it together, and it's that same thing again about putting all those memories together, stitching them carefully together, making them into a canvas that represents a big portion of my life. But of course, the other side of that lino is that brown. And to me, it talked about the reverse of those memories. So these weren't such happy memories. And it is the colour of the Pilbara.
And to me, they look like rusty metal, a lot of them, the brown ones.
There is some rusty metal in it, yeah. I have put some metal into it, yeah. But, yeah, it's that colour, that rich iron. Yeah. Pauline.
I'd just like to ask the both of you what part country played in the process of reconciliation, and how you, if so, how you actually worked with country. Was it a third person in the mix, kind of thing, like another entity?
Definitely, definitely. It's the place, I think, because at that time Desmond lived in Newman and I lived in Capel. So it was a place where we met every year on country for 4 years and performed those ceremonies. So without being there at that place, we wouldn't have performed those ceremonies. And in that way, it definitely is. It's a major stakeholder. Yeah, for sure. Des?
Yeah.
And when it went the other way, when Desmond came to Capel,
Yeah, I went to Capel, did some work with Helen on her property.
was that more about working?
Yeah, more about working.
You'd think I'd ask all the questions because you've been here for weeks, but I've forgotten what to call those.
Well, I'll get Desmond to
Baberi. Baberi.
Baberi.
I wonder if there's any other culture that uses such a sophisticated way of coming to some resolution. And perhaps we could send one to Netanyahu.
Yeah, definitely. Whew. I don't think he's receptive.
There was actually an African man at the opening, and he was fascinated by those and said what an absolutely brilliant idea. And he had never heard of anything like it, but it seems to me that with all the issues the world has, it would be fantastic if some of our leaders, and I don't include Kate Cheney because she's a different sort of leader, if people could think like that, let's talk until we get cross and then start all over again.
Yeah. It was things like that, Janet, that led me to realise what this feeling was. And that's over there on the wall. And it's my radiant heart.
You made a lot of radiant hearts, Helen.
I did. I made so many we couldn't put them up. If anybody would like a radiant heart, we have a lot. Yes. Yeah.
Anybody else?
So is this an ongoing, you're saying you've still got a lot more healing, or you will still carry on doing meeting on land and doing the ceremonies in the future after this show?
That would just be wonderful, Des. Yeah. Yeah.
What are the next steps? Do you have any plans?
Bit of a rest. Yes. Yeah. We haven't made any deliberate plans as yet, but as brother and sister, of course, it's not a finite thing, I think, is what I'm trying to say. It can't be after doing all that we've done to say, oh well, see you later, sweetheart. It's not that kind of thing, you know. This is a pretty unique exhibition. I've had exhibitions before with another person, but this feels totally different. And often you don't speak to that person for maybe 6 months because you've just had enough of them. But it's not like that. It's family.
Yeah, and this exhibition I think really goes beyond beyond the art. You know, it is about the process. It is with the photography documentation. You get an insight into their working together, which is quite unique because it allows you to piece together the story.
Yeah. 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 That's it? One more.
Oh, one more.
So I'd like to ask this to both of you. So this process and history and what we see this afternoon is a magnificent example of how art is life and how art can change life. Something that we see very rarely. I've forgotten my question. I've completely forgotten my question.
Don't worry.
Maybe it's because I asked too many questions, Desmond.
Just make something up.
Make something up. So I wonder if you could speculate on how the way in which art and your lives are so intertwined, and whether you think that your art and your lives have become intertwined with our lives as viewers and witnesses to your art, but also your life. Is that a question? I don't know.
Yeah. I think I know what you're asking.
So this is kind of like evidence and a witness of history that we are now witness to and will impact our lives. And I wonder if you could perhaps comment on how you think it might impact our lives. That was the question. Finally, I remembered.
I would hope, right, that there is an impact on your life, that Desmond and I can sit here together and answer your questions, say we care about each other. I would hope, thinking about what we've talked about today, about how that one opportunity that I had to go and work in the prison, that decision I made totally changed the course of my life. So, meeting Desmond and then working together, I'm hoping that you are also feeling, from my radiant heart to your radiant hearts, that what we've done is very, very special. It's an intimate look at what we've done. How can it not affect you? I'm hoping. I don't know where I'm going with that answer, but, you know, I can say one thing. Someone came to this exhibition early on, and they work in the Gintjella Boys' Home in New South Wales, which is a notorious, terrible place. And they have requested from Desmond and I that they can use our video, our talk about how we've worked together in their healing processes. So for me, and for Desmond, that's an unbelievable achievement that somebody would want to use our work. Don't you think, Des?
Yes.
Yeah. And then the other night, there was a group here called Together for Humanity, and the opportunity to speak to them via Janet was an opportunity to further talk about what Desmond and I had been doing and what it's meant to us and what it could mean in their processes as well. Spread the word. Yeah.
Okay.
Perhaps the fact that at least two men on the first night, the open, left in tears.
Yes.
Yeah.
Two men. Separate, they weren't together.
They weren't together, and one, in fact, was what I call the flip man, who makes sure we don't have any insects in the gardens. He loves coming here because he learns something every time. But for this exhibition, without any explanation, I don't think, he walked around and he was in tears.
Yeah.
And I think if I can move two people in a better direction, then that's a positive for the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, any final questions?
Good.
Helen and Desmond will be here in the gallery for a little while longer if you want
Yeah.
to have a more personal talk. Private
Get
talk.
out, Mom. Oh,
Sorry?
sorry.
Do you want me to turn it off?
Yeah.
And if you could join me in just giving them a round of applause. And thank you.
Thank you.